So welcome to another episode of the Keep Africa Trading Podcast from TradeMark Africa. And my guest here is somebody who's very significant across the Kenya trade space. We are here in Kigali, in Rwanda, for the Africa Trade Development Forum. And we're going to be having a conversation around what he does in the organizations that he's involved with that ultimately improve trade for Kenyan businesses across the African continent and beyond. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, John.
So maybe you can start off by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, and more specifically, how that intersects with what TradeMark Africa is doing today.
Thank you very much, Moses. I actually run two textile businesses in my personal capacity, one in Nakuru and one in Uganda. In Uganda, we run a full value chain from field to fashion. We export to Europe, to the US, and of course within the continent and region. And from Nakuru as well, we're running a synthetic value chain where we do from fiber to fashion. And that's also for the US market and to Goa and to Europe and to more than 11 African countries in COMESA, SADC region. So my business has been export for a long time, and I started this business early 90s. And it's really been the business that I am in. It was threatened for existence in the early 90s, as you know, because of second-hand clothes that made their way into Kenya.
Mitumba market.
Mitumba, yeah. So at that time, I actually took a conscious decision. I went against the will of my family because of family business. And I said, guys, either you export or you perish. There's nothing in between. So I became very strong in exports. I started, I became a member of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. I was 32 years old. I was probably the youngest board member at KEM. And then from KEM, I very quickly took over the chair of the COMESA subcommittee of the board, and very quickly then started using my networks to grow the business, export business. And in 2010, I became the chair of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And so that lasted for 2 years. And in between that, I became a board member of the Export Promotion Council for 3 years, as soon as the Kibaki government came in board 2002. And in 2006, I was moved from the Export Promotion Council to EPZA, where I sat for another 6 years. So I thought I'd done my rounds with two government state corporations where I was chair, promoting export, promoting Africa trade, promoting trade beyond Africa. And no, I wasn't done in 2015. By the way, I'm the only African who's been to a US congressional hearing twice. The extension of AGOA. Why should AGOA be extended? Because AGOA, as you know, is the only bipartisan trade agreement that the US has with Africa. Initially, it started with 35 African countries, went down to 27 African countries, and I spearheaded single-handedly the extension of AGOA up to 2025. As we speak today, AGOA will expire on 30th September 2025, in less than just over 10 months. And yes, there's a proposal on the table that this should be extended to 2041. It's got bipartisan support, but it's not been approved. And the US has had its elections right now. We're in a lame duck session. We are hopeful that in this lame duck session it can be passed, so that there's no uncertainty in the business that we're doing. As you know, Kenya's largest export is apparel, and that's the business I play. And we have over 54,000 jobs in our zones in EPZ. All those big brands, Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, they're all made in Kenya. And if you go to the US, you can see the Made in Kenya label now in Macy's and in the larger retail stores. You can actually start seeing that. But by and large, we're trying to bring this verticality so that we can bring speed to market. The European Union has just introduced a new carbon tax, which will come on stream in 2025. And so the whole game is changing. According to me, globalization has peaked, and we can now see regionalization, localization. The new word we heard today from Mukisa Kitui was that reshoring is the new mantra. It was nearshoring, onshoring, friendly shoring, and today I heard a new word said reshoring. So the world is becoming very protectionist. And the world is getting driven by geopolitics, and the name of the whole business environment is no longer driven by economics, it's driven by geopolitics. So you can imagine, if you're my friend, I do business with you. If you're not my friend, I don't want to know you. And we can see that trade war is on between the US and China. So we in Africa, we see opportunities in that, in those two positions, because we have duty-free, quota-free market access to the US. I single-handedly, of course, also got the Kenyan avocados export market to China. As you know, in 2015, President Kenyatta, Uhuru Kenyatta, appointed me the chair of the EPC this time round when I thought I was done with the government postings. And in 2018, he merged EPC with Brand Kenya to call it Kenya Export Promotion Branding Agency. So I'm now still the chair of the Kenya Export Promotion Branding Agency, and I'm happy to report that yes, Kenya's exports about $6 billion. Kenya's imports about $16 billion. Last year our exports went up, but our imports also went up by $1 billion. So we're looking at about a $10 billion deficit. And I only have one KPI with the government of Kenya, that how do goods export equal goods import? And that target is 2030. So it's not so far away, but I'm happy that in this conference, we can actually sit and talk and say, guys, we have this massive opportunity, the world's biggest economic trading bloc. We've got 55 countries. The landmass is 30 square kilometers. 30 million square kilometers is the landmass of the continent. You can fit in United States, Europe, Canada, Japan, India, China into that landmass. This is a landmass. You're talking about 1.4 billion people. You're talking about a $3.5 trillion economy. And it's massive opportunity. And by 2050, 1 in 4 people on this planet Earth will be African. By 2040, 30% of the world's working age population will be African, because we're a young population, maiden age of 19. So you can imagine our serious opportunity here is our human capital, which we don't value enough, because the rest of the world has got aging population, old population, and you can see that in Europe, US, Japan, China, one-child policy is now haunting them. So yes, they are going for a scramble for alternative labor, as I would call it, or because of robotics and machine learning and all that. But they have no choice, because they don't have the human talent that we have. So we're sitting pretty, and I was not shy of saying this last week, and I spoke in Arusha at the ESC summit of the heads of state, that we are the sexiest bride in town. How do we play our cards now? And I'm glad conferences like this. I spoke last weekend in Botswana on a similar subject. Tomorrow morning I'm speaking as well. And I'm very excited that, you know what, the energy is there. And I was in the UN General Assembly meeting in Unga in New York last month. And we had this whole big event for 2 days, and it was called Unstoppable Africa.
Wow.
So that's where we are.
First thing I want to say is thank God you thought you were done with all these things, and then Kenya said it's not done with you.
Yeah.
And I think your mandate has even now expanded beyond Kenya. I think you almost sound like a spokesperson for trade in Africa, intra-Africa, global traffic. You know, you really have a picture in this, because I think, you know, you have a lot of skin in the game as well. Your businesses are in this space. But it seems to me that you're playing a much, much bigger role in driving trade. The theme of this conference is really about digital trade. And I'd love to hear your perspectives, given your long-standing experience, the different viewpoints you have from the roles that you serve, but more importantly, going forward, what do you think digital trade is going to look like for Africa in this new context?
Okay, so I'm actually going to do a live demo tomorrow. So if you are here, come and have a watch. I'm actually going to use that digital connect that we already have, and not many people on the continent know that we are already trading within ourselves. The phase down of the MFN, which is the most favored nation status tariff book, is starting to collapse. By 2030, we have already agreed 92% of the book, of the customs tariff book. We've got 8% left, which is largely sensitive goods, and we're still being careful. One of them is the textile apparel value chain. What should be the duty in? So we're looking at a borderless East Africa, and we're looking at a borderless TFTA, which is, as you know, on the 25th of July this year, SADC, COMESA, and EAC signed the TFTA, which was a long-standing operational TFTA, out of which 67% of the book has been agreed upon. And then we're looking at all these regional economic communities, which are the building blocks to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and all that gets connected. And we have this opportunity at the doorstep with the phase down, which has already begun, and I'll do a live demo tomorrow.
Oh.
As a Kenyan wanting to export, say, to South Africa, and wanting to export, say, tea, and what is my current tariff today in December 2024, and what will be in 3 weeks' time on 1st of January 2025. There is a complete phase down in certain product lines. It's 5-year phase down, but for example, tea, which is $1.4 billion of Kenya's business, our number one export of goods, because our number one real export is the diaspora income, and number two is tourism at $2.8 billion. And so tea plays a very important role for us. So I was also involved in market access of avocados to China.
Oh.
I even paid as the chair of the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. They were trying to dilly-dally and say, no, we want to come and see how do you manage, how does your pest control, we don't want doodles to come in here with fresh avocados, you can sell that frozen. And you can see the avocado business, we're now almost the third, fourth largest avocado producer in the world because we gave a market to our people. And that market was China. And with 1.4 Chinese consuming, you can imagine the size of the pie. It's massive. To me, there's no rocket science. Any value chain, any product line that you look at two things. And you probably don't have to go to Harvard Business School after what I'm going to tell you, those two things. One is size of the pie, and the other is slice of the pie. If you can determine the size of this pie and the slice that you want in your business, in your country, in your product, in your sector, you're a winner. Most people don't have information, and market information, market intelligence is super important. And tomorrow, if you're watching me do this live demo on one item, we can choose any item, you'll actually start saying, hey man, this digital connection has already happened. I can actually decide what I want to sell to Ghana, where is the arbitrage, or to Nigeria, or to Togo, or to Benin, and maybe from Tanzania. Now this doesn't make sense from Kenya. Maybe I should do it from Botswana. So the continent is connected digitally. The trade is connected digitally. The customs in all these 55 countries are now recognized as the new e-tariff book, as I call it. And what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve a borderless Africa. Imagine working with 1.4 billion people at your doorstep. Intra-Africa trade is one of the lowest in the world. As you know, Europeans trading with Europeans is 67%. So Europe trading with Europe. Asia trading with Asia, Americas trading with Americas is 45%. The Asians trading with the Asians is 25%. Africans trading with Africans is less than 15%. So shame on us. We don't like trading with ourselves. We'd rather do, instead of intra-Africa trade, we might rather do extra intra-Africa trade with the rest of the world. And 40% of Africa's trade is with two countries. I will rather call them one country, called Chindia. 40% of our business is China and India. We need to change that paradigm. We need to trade with ourselves. We can create the jobs and we can create the opportunities on the continent. Our infrastructure has largely been extractive because of our colonial past. Extract out of this diamond mine, take it away, polish it, take cocoa away from Ghana, go and make chocolates in Switzerland, sell back in Africa. We need to change that. We need to connect Africa both digitally and physically. And we're in business.
Now, you've almost painted a picture of utopia for me, in terms of what that future looks like. But what are sort of the barriers to making these things happen? I'm sure from your point of view, you've seen them.
The barriers, like I said, the barriers that I mentioned were, of course, one barrier is the infrastructure.
Yeah.
A lot of people, even to come to Kigali, had to take 2 flights.
Yes.
Right? I was on a panel last week with the deputy CEO of Ethiopian Airways. They said they go 570 flights into the continent every week. And he said the next second best operator would not even have half of that. So we just don't have rail, road, air connectivity. I wanted to go to Casablanca about 10 days ago. I could only go via Europe or via Dubai or via Qatar. So if we start connecting the continent, so the infrastructure gaps are massive. If that corridor, the north-north corridor, as I call it, from Lamu to Douala was ready, or a train and road, how much cargo can we get from the Indian Ocean into the Pacific Ocean? Right now we have to go around the Cape of Good Hope. I wanted to buy cotton from Mali, and the cotton from Mali to Mombasa was going to take 5 months because you had to go to Singapore. before it comes back.
What?
Yeah, so these connectivity issues, infrastructure issues, largely physical, because our historic past was extractive and not interactive connectivity on the continent. People have been talking about the Cape to Cairo road for a long time, but parts of it is not ready. But 70% is ready. Why can't we fix the 30%? Why can't you drive to Cairo from Cape Town? You know, so things like that. And I think once we start doing that and start dismantling the borders, like East Africa is a classical example. We've really dismantled all the borders. But we've seen issues where we've created non-tariff barriers and tariff barriers have been removed. So those are the challenges you're talking about. And this afternoon at lunch, I did speak to the group that I was sitting with, and I said, guys, we have a problem. Our non-tariff barrier or the stay of application in East Africa. I just came back from the summit in Arusha 2 days ago when the 8 presidents of East Africa sat down on the 24th summit. But the issue is, yes, we are, and I go into meetings, I introduce myself as an East African. My passport, if you look at it in your passport, you'll see it's East African community.
Correct.
At the bottom in small letters is written Republic of Kenya. Why can't we all think like East Africans first? And we should introduce ourselves. I'm an East Africa, I come from the county, not country, county of Kenya. It's a very different paradigm. But as soon as we go into meetings, we say, oh, I come from the Republic of Kenya. I come from the Republic of Uganda. I come from the United Republic of Tanzania. We've already created walls, and 3 of us are sitting discussing a market which is ours collectively and not individually.
So it's a paradigm shift. Yeah, we need to change the way we see it.
We need to change. You know, I tell you one thing. I grew up in Kenya, and my thinking in Kenya was that, and that's because of my training in export over the years, and at Kenya Association of Manufacturers being the chair of KAM, and now the chair of KEPSA, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, which is almost 80 business member organization, 500 corporates. We touch 2 million lives at KEPSA. I'm the chair of KEPSA, the private sector. And when I look at my mind, I say that we in Kenya, we're only allowed to sell 20% into the domestic territory. And what is the domestic territory in my definition? Is the 8 countries of East Africa. So Uganda is not export for me. Selling to Kisumu and selling to Kampala should be exactly the same. The only difference is that we haven't harmonized our domestic taxes like VAT. In Kenya, we're at 16%, Uganda is 18%, right? So if we harmonize that, I should be able to make that invoice. And my goods should be able to go to Kampala and to Kisumu at the same pace. But unfortunately, Kenya is looking at the neighboring countries of East Africa, or the neighboring counties, maybe let me correct it, of East Africa as a domestic territory, and the rest of the countries are looking at Kenya as an export market. So between them, they still have to have that paradigm correction that the territory, customs territory of East Africa is 8 member states, including the DRC, Somalia, one US member, and South Sudan, and that is your domestic territory.
Wow.
That's when this thing will move. And that's when those non-tariff barriers will stop. Otherwise, I'm protecting myself against the Kenyans and the Tanzanians against Ugandans. You know, so we have these competitive forces. And I love what President Museveni says. The problem with Africa is we are all pygmies trying to compete who's the taller pygmy. So really speaking, I think you're 100% right. We need to change the way we're doing business.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed that conversation. I personally am very much informed and educated about things I didn't know about trade in Kenya and the rest of Africa. And I think such a wonderful resource he's been in sharing these insights. And I'm so grateful that he did not stop in 2006, as he pointed out, but rather continues to support the Kenyan trade opportunities for the country. So thank you very much for joining us for this edition of this podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one.